Number 9. Christopher DePaolus. After working as an NYPD officer for 20 years, Christopher DePaolus retired in 2013 after hurting his knee during a criminal chase. He was awarded a pension of $82,000 per year based on the injury. He then moved to Florida, where he was hired as a deputy for the Broward County Sheriff's Office. DePaolus passed all the physical tests for the job despite his alleged disability. The position paid a salary of more than $52,000 per year in addition to his pension, which he was collecting tax-free. Several months after he landed the job, the New York Daily News called DePaolus out in an article for allegedly faking his disability. In addition to passing the fitness test to become a cop, the newspaper revealed that he was also an avid long-distance marathon runner. When the story first broke, it was unclear whether DePaolus had done anything illegal or if he'd cleverly exploited systematic loopholes without breaking any laws. He never told the Broward Sheriff's Office about his disability pension or knee injury, but he also wasn't specifically asked about these things, and he was honest in telling them that he retired from the NYPD. At the very least, it seemed as though DePaolus had a chip on his shoulder. In a Facebook post from right after Barack Obama was elected president in 2012, he reportedly expressed his desire to milk the system for as much money as possible, since, in his post to social media, he wrote, "Everyone else is going to get free and not have to work. I plan to do the same now." After making news headlines, DePaolus was let go from his position. An agency spokesperson said that he'd failed to meet the standards of his one-year probationary period, but declined to go into specifics. Number 8. Kenneth Bahadur. 35-year-old Jagdesh Mangal, a businessman from Guyana, was at a bar in Georgetown one evening in 2022 when a group of men he was involved with forced him into the back seat of a car. They robbed the victim at gunpoint, taking more than $17,000, 3.6 million Guyanese dollars worth of jewelry, and they forced him to sign a note acknowledging that he owed them money. After the perpetrators let him go, Mangal reported the incident to the police. Officers reviewed surveillance footage and interviewed witnesses at the bar, including the owner, who said that she'd urged a retired officer to intervene on the situation, but he refused. Further investigation led authorities to suspect that the former cop, 55-year-old Kenneth Bahadur, wasn't just at fault for doing nothing, but that he may have been directly involved in the robbery and abduction of Mangal. According to one witness, Bahadur was among 4 suspects who approached Mangal and assaulted him while demanding their money. Bahadur allegedly told the 3 men he was seen with to take Mangal away from the bar. Authorities charged the ex-cop and 39-year-old businessman Samir Bacchus in connection with the incident, while the 2 other suspects remain at large. In a criminal complaint, Bahadur and Bacchus are accused of kidnapping Mangal with the intent to secretly confine him. Both men pleaded not guilty and are out on bond while awaiting trial. Number 7. Lee Reedy. From 2013 to 2017, LAPD detective Isabel Villegas had an on-and-off-again affair with her married colleague, Officer Lee Reedy. In early 2019, she sued the department for allegedly failing to take action after she repeatedly reported Reedy for horrific acts of sexual abuse. The lawsuit accused Reedy of assaulting Villegas. He threatened to pass her intimate photos around at the workplace if she didn't return gifts that he'd given her, and eventually, he followed through with the threat. In court documents, Villegas claimed that Reedy never faced any consequences for the abuse, which continued to escalate. Reedy was still employed with the department when Villegas filed the lawsuit, but soon afterward, he retired. Villegas also ended her 30-year career as a result of the stress caused by the ordeal. Authorities arrested Reedy on charges of extortion, domestic violence, and violating a restraining order. He ultimately pleaded to 1 count of misdemeanor injury of a spouse or girlfriend and was sentenced to 3 years of probation as a result. Reedy was also banned from owning guns and was required to attend counseling for his apparent issues. Number 6. Roberto Gutierrez. Retired Las Vegas, New Mexico police officer Roberto Gutierrez was a Trump supporter and his mailman was a Biden supporter. Over a several-week period in 2021, the 2 routinely argued over politics when the postal carrier dropped off the former cop's mail. The mailman eventually got sick of arguing and began to avoid Gutierrez. When he was tasked with delivering a package that required a signature, he left a slip inside Roberto's mailbox saying that he had to pick it up at the post office. It's a violation of Postal Service policy to do this without knocking to see if the recipient is home, but the mailman was apparently fed up enough with the situation to ignore the rules. During a confrontation over the undelivered package, Gutierrez punched the postal worker square in the face, causing him to fall backwards and hit his head on the bumper of his truck. The disgruntled customer then hit the mailman 2 more times, knocking him out cold. Gutierrez told the cops that he was the real victim and that the postal worker threatened him. In bodycam footage obtained by the media, a responding officer could be heard telling Gutierrez that it's unlikely he'll go to jail since he's a retired cop. But as it turned out, the violent confrontation was captured on a neighbor's surveillance camera. The video seemed to contradict Gutierrez's claims and instead suggest that he was the aggressor. In the footage, the postal worker could be seen trying to get away from his attacker, and he didn't hit back a single time. While the local police department may have been willing to overlook certain things, the feds weren't, and Gutierrez was taken into custody on 1 count of assault on a federal officer. He's now facing up to 20 years in prison as a consequence of his actions. Number 5. Glenn Hogman. Tragedy struck the town of Harrison, New York in 2015 when retired White Plains officer Glenn Hogman killed 2 of his daughters and took his own life. To make matters even worse, he also fatally shot the family's 3 dogs. Hogman's wife, Anna Marie, and his oldest daughter, Samantha, were on a weekend trip when the crime occurred. When Anna Marie couldn't reach anyone at home, she asked the boyfriend of one of her younger daughters to check on the rest of her family. He was the one who called the police to report the crime, and when officers arrived at the scene, they walked in on a sight that can only be described as unspeakable horror. Hogman had retired just 3 weeks earlier after 22 years on the force. According to the New York Post, he deliberately cut Anna Marie and Samantha out of his pension benefits, leaving them high and dry. A family friend described the situation as a selfish final insult. Sources told the press that Hogman and Anna Marie had considered separating, and that Anna Marie had recently filed a police report about an argument with her husband. Based on reports from the Harrison Police Department, she wanted the incident on file but wasn't interested in pressing charges and said that no abuse had occurred during the altercation. The horrific act of violence was especially shocking given Hogman's outstanding service throughout his law enforcement career. Just a year earlier, he'd received a life-saving award for keeping an unresponsive patient alive until paramedics arrived. He also had no history of mental illness and was known around his neighborhood as a respectable family man who doted on his children. Sadly, situations like this prove that sometimes it's impossible to know what's going on inside a person's mind until it's too late. Number 4. Jerome Philippe. During the early morning hours one day in 2022, a police officer approached a vehicle that was parked near the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. It belonged to 53-year-old Jerome Philippe, a retired NYPD officer who left the force in 2018 and was living in Flint, Michigan at the time. According to the U.S. Capitol Police, Philippe allegedly flashed a fake badge that said Department of the Interpol and falsely claimed to be an investigator with the agency. He gave officers permission to search his car, where they found ballistic vests, a BB gun, and ammunition. Police charged Philippe with unlawful possession of high-capacity magazines and unregistered ammunition. In an interview with the New York Daily News, he described the charges against him as BS. Philippe didn't seem to understand what the big deal was about ammunition without a gun to use it with. He told the outlet that he stopped at the nation's capital while driving from the Bronx to North Carolina after his grandmother's funeral. When the police approached him, he was tired, and he claimed that he told them he used a fake Interpol badge for his business, but denied impersonating a special agent. Philippe made it a point to mention several times throughout the interview that he's pro-law enforcement. He speculated that he was targeted due to lingering fears from the Capitol riot in early 2021, which occurred very close to where Philippe was parked. According to the Daily News, he also claimed that he was slated to receive an award at the Presidential Service Center in Grover, North Carolina. The outlet spoke with an executive at the center who said that Philippe had called 2 times in recent months, expressing an interest in membership but never applied to join. The same spokesperson also clarified that there were no plans to give Philippe an award. Unfortunately, the only person who can explain the inconsistencies in the story is Philippe himself, who seems determined to stand by his belief that the cops made a mistake when they arrested him. Number 3. Michael Ritzy. Michael Ritzy was an NYPD officer for 9 years before retiring in 2000 due to an injury he incurred on the job. He was married to the daughter of a Gambino crime family member who was involved in illegal gambling, and he was arrested in 2009 for participating in a different gambling ring. But he pleaded guilty to promoting gambling, which is a misdemeanor and was only penalized with a fine. The charge was trivial compared to Ritzy's real trouble, which began in 2016 when he was accused of running a multi-million-dollar prostitution service that arranged dates between high-end escorts and wealthy clients. The business, BJM Manhattan Steaks and Entertainment, advertised its services online for anywhere between $400 and $2,000 per hour. A fleet of drivers remained on standby at all times to drive escorts to and from appointments, which typically occurred at clients' homes and in upscale hotels. The operation caught the attention of federal investigators in 2012 when they linked some of Ritzy's financial activities to another man who was operating a known prostitution business. He was consequently charged with money laundering 4 years later in 2016. Shortly after Ritzy's arrest, his lawyer, Javier Solano, told reporters that his client's company sold companionship services only and that it wasn't a prostitution business. Solano claimed that Ritzy had even fired some of his employees after discovering that they'd broken the law during their time with clients. In the end, Ritzy took a deal and pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to launder money. In the end, he was sentenced to 15 months in prison. At his sentencing, he took responsibility for his actions and admitted that he had no one to blame but himself for the legal mess that he ended up in. Number 2. Jesse Porter. After retiring from the Washington, D.C. police force in 2020, 58-year-old Jesse Porter took a job training officers who work for the district's library system, which apparently has its own force. During a demonstration on how to use expandable batons one day in 2022, Porter discharged his firearm and fatally shot 25-year-old librarian Morika Mannion. He's now facing a manslaughter charge in the ongoing case. Porter told the responding officer that he pulled his gun out of the holster while joking around with the group and taking a class picture, and that it somehow fired accidentally. There was a loud boom, and Mannion collapsed to the floor. There were reportedly several brightly colored training guns at the scene which were incapable of firing. According to responding officers, Porter repeatedly said that he thought he had his training gun, not a firearm capable of inflicting bodily harm. Surveillance footage of the incident shows Porter trying to perform CPR on Mannion. He truly appeared distraught and remorseful, based on reports from officers who reviewed the video. Sadly, Mannion died as a result of her injuries. As Porter was being escorted from the building, he looked at a library police officer and apologized for shooting the victim. Metropolitan Police Chief Robert Canty said it was unclear why Porter had live ammunition in a training environment, but he explained that it was bad practice. He was released from custody under strict conditions as the case continues to play out, but he's required to check in weekly with pre-trial officials over the phone until a conclusion is reached. Number 1. Kevin Canty. Kevin Canty worked as an NYPD transit officer until 2013 when he retired early due to a disability. The following year, he shot his wife Jessica multiple times in front of their young children at their home in Queens after suspecting her of cheating on him. Unfortunately, Jessica died from her injuries. During questioning, Canty broke down and admitted to the crime. The incident came as a shock to friends and family of the couple who'd been together since they were teenagers. It was less surprising to neighbors who told police that Canty was prone to violent outbursts and frequently argued with his wife. He took a deal in court and pleaded guilty to manslaughter in exchange for a 25-year sentence. At his sentencing hearing, Canty apologized for killing Jessica, whose sister told NBC4 that she believed his apology was sincere. In a Facebook post, a relative wrote that while the plea deal may not have satisfied everyone involved in the case, it spared Jessica's loved ones from having to endure the trauma of a trial. Would you rather marry the son or daughter of a corrupt retired police officer who still wields considerable power in your area, or the child of an organized crime boss who's done time in the past and isn't afraid to do more? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.